Thanks very much. We're here in Cape Town, outside of the Cape Town City Hall. Of course, this is where the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is going to be delivering his medium-term budget policy statement. It's the second one that he'll be delivering. And of course, there are many things that he's going to be speaking to. Economists right now are talking about key issues that he may be speaking to. Of course, Eskom's debt. There's an expectation that he may well announced that he's going to take on, or government will take on, some level of debt and transfer it to the national balance sheet, which will mean that the public debt will rise. It will then also mean that our debt service costs will in turn also rise because we take on more of Eskom debt. This will be bad for us in the short term, but it's for a greater goal to free up Eskom to be able to improve its lot so that it's able to keep the lights on in the country. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is the issue of the public sector wages. We've heard very controversially that Minister Thulasnxesi has decided to inform the Finance Minister to push through the 3% wage increase for the medium term. It's not clear whether that's for year 1, 2 and 3% each, but certainly he's said that they should go ahead so that the Finance Minister is able to deliver a speech that speaks to certainty around what the government is going to give public sector workers. There are some workers, particularly teachers' unions, who have accepted the 3% increase, but there are many others, the likes of Pop Crew, Nahawu in the health sector, who have said that they're not interested in a 3% wage increase. They want something in the order of 10%. So that's also problematic. That's likely to meet with some anger amongst many of the public sector unions. So it'll be interesting to hear what the Finance Minister has to say on that particular issue. And then, of course, the elephant in the room is always the state-owned enterprises. We've already talked about Eskom, but of course many others needing assistance. We understand that the SABC may need assistance. We understand that Denel and of course others. We know the post office is in a really bad shambles right now. They need some assistance. So government will have to indicate, because remember, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana talked about asserting tough love to SOEs. So what kind of love is he going to be showing these SOEs? Is he going to talk about the possibility of getting rid of some others in order to balance the book? So this is going to be an interesting time indeed. Now, one of the things that we've done as the SABC News is we've been running some polls, online polls, to get your view as to what you think, and also to find out what kind of historical knowledge you may know about budgets. To tell us a little bit about that poll and the results thereof, I do have my colleague Sthembiso Sithole with me. If you can come into shot. Thank you very much, Sthembiso. So tell us a little bit about the online poll and what the results are thus far.
Well, without a shadow of a doubt, it's going to be a busy day. Economists, consumers, and those with a willing buying power, of course, will be expecting a lot from the Finance Minister. Of course, on our social media platform, we are asking under the Twitter account on the agenda, which day was South Africa's first democratic budget tabled? Of course, the options there are A, February 24, 1994, June 22nd, 1994, March 17, 1994. So we just want to see how knowledgeable when it comes to that. Would you be voting, Nompu?
Of course I'll be voting when I catch a gap. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you, just what is the buzz around the medium-term budget? What are people generally saying?
Of course, it's no secret that the issue of fuel is one of their concerns, job creation, unemployment, and those, of course, who are still relying more on their grant money from government. So there's that sentiment, but most importantly, economists giving advice in terms of how the Finance Minister should be tackling today's budget.
Thanks very much, Sthembiso. So, of course, Sthembiso talking about what some of the expectations are from the public, but it's always said year in, year out that it's always a very tight rope that the Finance Minister has to walk as he tries to appease everyone and balance the book. So it's going to be a tough one indeed. Of course, ordinary people are looking at what's happening, but also our politicians who think that they can do better in governing the country and managing public finances. They're also observing. So to get some insight from them, let me hand over to my colleague, Abra Barbier, to get their views.
Nompu, thank you very, very much. I, of course, as you've mentioned, will be speaking to a range of MPs today. First up, I have Mr. Voted Vessels of the Freedom Front Plus. Sir, can I ask you to join me over here? Earlier when we spoke, you spoke about the windfall in revenue, and even though we do have this windfall, government should still be very, very careful about how it will be spending. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I think the Minister will this afternoon make mention of the fact that there's higher than expected tax revenue, that the nominal GDP is higher than expected, and that obviously as a result of the fact that inflation is higher than expected in the first place, and there's also windfall gains because of commodity prices being high, the mining industry doing quite well. But this is temporary. In the long term, government must be very careful how they spend those gains, and this will have to be spent to, in the long term, get us out of the fiscal crisis and get the economy going. Because there's still a budget deficit, a very, very high budget deficit. The debt of government is still out of control, and that needs to be addressed in the long term. And there's a lot of other priorities like infrastructure that's completely in decay that needs to be addressed.
And then on the issue of SOEs, opposition parties are expressing concern about extra spending on SOEs. Your thoughts on that?
Well, there's very little choice with regards to Eskom. Firstly, we expect that the Minister will use his policy statement to announce further details on a sustainable and long-term plan with regards to solving the energy crisis in South Africa. We can't continue with load shedding, but that also includes getting Eskom's debt under control, 400 billion rand of debt. A lot of that is guaranteed by government, but the expectation is that the state will take over about 200 billion rand of that debt. That will increase the government's debt servicing cost by about 15 million rand. But there is very little choice to do that. But now it's also then dependent on what will the plan be to not only get the debt under control, but get the utility to provide the necessary energy for South Africa. That also includes addressing the electricity network, because switching over to renewable energy means nothing in South Africa if the grid can't take it. So there must be investment in infrastructure, in energy infrastructure on all levels, also in municipalities, to actually address that. And then obviously, lastly, there can't be any money given to SAA to fund the transaction, the R1 transaction of SAA. It can't be afforded at this stage. People are hungry, people are suffering. We need to address the real issues, and we can't fund the ANC's ideology of a state-funded airline.
Mr. Voted Vessels of the FF Plus, thank you so much for your time. I'll catch up with you later. Next up, I have Brett Herron of the Good Party. Let's start off. Welcome to the show, sir. Let's start off with a high cost of living. You specifically raised the issue of relief grants. Can you just elaborate on that?
Well, South Africa is in a socio-economic crisis. Poverty and inequality is on the rise. And the social relief of distress grant, the 350 Rand per month grant that was introduced during COVID, has brought some relief. Now, that grant is supposed to come to an end at the end of March 2023. What we're saying is that it can never come to an end. We cannot now remove that small amount of relief that has been provided to poor people and expect them to get on with their lives. So we need to hear from the Minister that that grant is going to be extended, and that ultimately it will form the basis of a basic income grant that will support the approximately 8 or 9 million people who are unemployed and are unable to find jobs because our economy is not creating enough jobs.
In terms of job creation, also we spoke about a mixed model in terms of energy, and at the top of your list, of course, is also green energy.
Yeah, look, we need to stabilize the energy supply, and so there needs to be a short-term fix that we need to hear from the Minister as to how we can do that immediately. But any funding that goes into energy supply in Eskom needs to have a long-term view, and we need to be moving towards clean and renewable energy, including the training of employees that are in the energy sector, so that there is a just transition from a coal-based, fossil fuel-based energy supply to a clean and renewable energy supply.
President of the Good Party, thank you so much for speaking to us. I'll chat to you later on after the speech. Mr. Steve Swart of the ACDP. Mr. Swart, you of course serve on the Justice Committee and as well as the Standing Committee on Finance. These are two key committees when it comes to the fight against corruption. And is the fight against corruption something that you are hoping to hear the Minister reflect on today?
Yes, absolutely. And morning to your viewers. We, from the ACDP side, have consistently said that the law enforcement agencies, which include the Hawks, include the Special Investigating Unit, include the National Prosecuting Authority and the Investigative Directorate, need additional funding to be able to fight corruption, fight state capture, and implement the recommendations now of the State Capture Report. We notice that President Ramaphosa has also emphasized a lot on that, on the establishment of a standalone anti-corruption unit similar to the Scorpions. And we know the Scorpions were very effective and were only closed because they were so effective in going and prosecuting highly linked political leaders. And that's the reason why they were closed, regrettably. But what we need now is an independent unit, and the NPA is pushing for greater independence so that we can fight that. But the forensic data issue is so necessary. Forensic analysts, and they come at a great cost to be able to prosecute successfully these highly complex matters of corruption, money laundering and such. And that is so critically important at this. So we're really hoping, although that there was some additional funding given previously, and we're hoping that going forward in the medium term, substantial additional amounts will be given to law enforcement agencies for corruption and, of course, to fight murders and rapes in society. Citizens do not feel safe in society, and it is the primary role of government to protect their citizens from physical attacks, from rapes, from murders, and so that in addition to what we're saying to fight corruption.
Mr. Swart, can we just switch over to SOEs and Eskom in particular? The Minister should be making some pronouncement in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, the power shedding that we have ongoing continually is devastating households, businesses, our economy, and it's got to be addressed. And one of the ways of resolving this issue is to look at the debt that Eskom has, almost 400 billion rand, and it is costing them 55 billion per year to service that debt. So one of the ways of doing that is to shift some of that debt to the government's balance sheet, which can be loaned against at a much cheaper rate. And there's talk about a deal. Obviously, there would have to be conditions attached to that from National Treasury's side, that it assists in not making the fiscal consolidation part, which is so important, worse. But Eskom's debt has to be addressed, and we are expecting some announcement with conditions today. But clearly, it can't affect the sovereign debt anymore. We already know our sovereign debt is so high, 4 trillion rand going up to 5.4 trillion rand, with debt service costs being the highest budget item at the moment, 333 billion rand per year just to service our sovereign debt. So we've got to reduce the debt. Part of it is to reduce the debt of Eskom, shifting it. But secondly, we've got to make use of this tax windfall, estimated to be about 80 to 100 billion rand, to partially reduce government debt and then partially provide a social security net by possibly extending the 350 rand a month social distress grant for another year. Possibly, because people on the ground are really struggling financially at the moment.
Steve Swart of the ACDP, thank you so much for chatting to us. I'll chat to you later on again. Well, there you have it. Political parties weighing in on their expectations, and they will be coming back to us later on after the Minister has delivered his speech. Studio?